maybe I'll just free the microphone from its confines there. So there are a number of sort of stereotypical things that come up when we talk about authorship and technology and collaboration, and I really expected to hear them. So for example, I think it's common to observe that kind of technologies become embodied, they become tools, they become platforms, and then we build upon them when we author in a way that's different than building on top of other people's conceptions, even though we're always also building on people's conceptions, because maybe we don't fully understand them, or maybe they push back, or maybe and so on. That didn't come up at all, right? Another is that technological configurations assume certain kinds of collaborations. So for example, it's very hard for me to be both the actor on the stage and the person who is running the lights up in the booth at the same time. And interestingly, that didn't come up much at all. And then another is that I think sort of came close to coming up is this idea that technology takes sort of slow and limited kinds of collaboration and makes them faster, more open, more conversational. That sort of came up, right? But actually, what really intrigues me is the things that sort of came up instead, right? So one that I thought was interesting is bringing models from one kind of collaborative authorship to another, right? So bringing models from activism to art, maybe we've heard about before, but I was really also intrigued to hear about bringing models from software to filmmaking, right? That really hadn't, that's not a stereotypical sort of framing. Also, while we talked a lot about the challenges of getting collaborative work recognized, and that just came up a little, I think it's a very important point. I don't think we often enough connect that to its always already present opposite, which is trying to get that collaboration free of IP law, right? And so it's recognized in this restrictive way, but not in this productive way. But then I'd say the thing that was there in every element of this was the idea of how technology comes together with authorship to allow many people to somehow be part of the work, right? So the archive and its match, the 10 global lives and their much larger number of crews, or members of crews, the many Jewish homegrown histories, the students in many courses, the multiple owners and crafters, right? I mean, just like, there was this line that really started to bring up a question for me, and so as a respondent, this is just a question I want to turn to the panel. Is creative connection between large numbers of loosely connected people an artifact of who got invited to be on this panel, or a deeply intrinsic element of how we see authoring and technology influencing each other? Okay, so I had it written down in front of me. Okay, so is creative connection between large numbers of loosely connected people, right? The many people with homegrown histories, the many students in classes, the many people who are matched with different archives and so on, right? Is this just an artifact that this thread runs through? Is just an artifact who happened to be asked to be on this panel? Or is it a deeply intrinsic element of how we see authoring and technology influencing each other?
Well, for me, I was introduced recently to this glacier concept of the Crucian floor, and so the barrier to technology, lifting the barriers to collaboration between like-minded people, and Global Lives embodies that for me. I mean, that's what I felt when, I tried to tell all my friends about this idea I had, and my friends in the US and Brazil, and I got a little bit of traction, and then all of a sudden this Venezuelan woman living in Japan, who's a professor at an American university there, wants me to give a talk via Skype in her classroom in Tokyo. And all of a sudden she wants to produce a shoot with me in Tokyo, and then all of a sudden she wants to go to China and help do a shoot in China, and then to Lebanon, and then one of her students wants to go to Kazakhstan. And I couldn't have ever gotten those connections with these few like-minded people, or people who wanted to express what I was trying to express without these technologies. It was something that was just like so natural and organic that evolved out of me sort of putting my work on the internet and seeing what happened.
And I don't think it's just organic. I think it's very much a question of what kinds of relations that you create, with these global connections. Is it possible that you just create a project and then, end up colonizing those who are the assistants, for example, or the way that it's implemented? What I described about that Chinese-American, collaboration on the global workshop, we were very specific that was not going to be one colonizing or teaching the other, but it was a productive exchange and really transformed both. And now it's being expanded to other nations as well. So I think that there's this move toward inclusiveness, including more people, that in fact this technology has enabled. That doesn't mean the old power struggles aren't mapped onto the new form.
I'd actually like to forward the question to Jolene, because I think that while you were right about a lot of things we showed, the examples she was showing were profoundly local connections, and they might not have been between people who were genetically related, but they had become related as a process, as part of the process. Jolene, would you agree with that?
I'm not sure. I'm going to give my own take on this, I think. First of all, what I was talking about is very different than what Noah was talking about. First of all, it's not people who are loosely connected, and it's not large numbers. So I think it's a very different practice in indigenous settings. And secondly, I do not think it's the technology that is eliciting this kind of behavior. And the reason is that when I speak with Native people about these behaviors that we see on the net and also in indigenous cultures, these sharing, cooperative, collaborative behaviors, they say something very simple. They say, this is what human history has been about for most of our history. Your civilization got in the way for a few hundreds or thousands of years, but when you had a space that was somewhat freer from those constraints, those tribal sharing behaviors just re-emerged. Surprise. It's part of our deep human background and history, and it's re-emerging. So that's a native answer to this, that it is not produced by the technology, it is produced by the users who have this deep memory of collaboration and sharing, and who find spaces that are open enough for this behavior to re-emerge. It's what children do when we don't school them too heavily. They naturally share, they naturally collaborate.
For my project, it's a deeply local project that has started to expand beyond what I can do as one person, because an increasing number of people are asking me to participate. But the other aspect of this is that I presented it in Australia in several places, and people liked the model so much that there's actually, at an archive there, people want to actually start a project similar to this. So with a website, this will eventually technologically expand, but at this point it's expanding through another kind of technology, which is more personal, more word of mouth, through events and things like that.
I think that your question about colonizing the assistants or colonizing the collaborators was really relevant. And something that I've started to notice as I do this project and this work is that a lot of the people that I'm collaborating with come from these totally different fields. And right now I'm in a position where I get emails pretty much every day from someone who wants to collaborate. And I usually have to say no, but we're trying to create a structure where I can say yes to all of these people. But what I keep noticing is that there are these parallel reputational economies, and forgive sort of the brute historical materialism there, but I see this sort of cultural production that I'm taking part in as allowing a lot of people to excel in fields. We have anthropologists, we have sociologists, we have independent filmmakers, we have journalists, we have people who are in all these different places where participating and collaborating can benefit them in totally different and to me very unexpected ways. And all of a sudden now there's an academic journal, we have an anthropologist who's giving academic talks about this, and so he's getting it into that economy of reputation. And I guess when it gets broad enough, I start to feel like, maybe they're getting more out of the work than I am.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, I'm experiencing something very similar, where people are volunteering. And it's a question about volunteers. The model is very different from the one we talked about in the previous panel of the movie, collaboration where there are fixed hierarchical roles. Where in this case, it might be that somebody wants to be a volunteer and you hadn't anticipated at all. Well, there's an architectural designer. So the question that I know that I ask in those cases is, well, what would you like to do? I mean, what kinds of work? And then suddenly it just goes in another kind of direction. And, I didn't even ask for these volunteers, but they are volunteering and it's skewing the whole project. And I welcome that as something very positive. But I think that's the question about how the power relations figure in is absolutely crucial. And one just cannot go to a kind of crude technological determinism. And I think one has to really actively resist that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think these are all embedded in social and cultural hierarchies in the case of global collaborations in many different societies that offer many different types of opportunities to the people in there.
No, do you want to respond to that?
I think I provoked just what I was hoping